organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk on a topic which is very, I feel, important from a very practical point of view. Also very important from a patient perspective also, because a lot of patients would really like to know whether they would like to be on insulin or they would like to be on oral antidiabetics. Now, what I'm going to talk about is that my friend did show you a lot of data, but what I believe, there is one very strong belief of mine, and that belief is that when I asked Dr. Agarwal, when we meet personally, I hope sometime very soon, if I ask him personally, would he like to really put his patient on insulin, I'm sure he would say yes. So he would, in a theoretical note, he would really agree with me, and I'm sure he would, being an ethical physician that he is. On the other hand, in practice, and when I go back to my practice tomorrow, there'll be a lot of patients I would myself put on a fourth oral antidiabetic. So the challenge of this debate is that sometimes we have to reach the middle ground, and there's no right answer to it. But having said that, I'm going to argue for insulin because I believe that insulin is the best treatment available for both type 1 as well as type 2 diabetes also. And that is going to be my main context of argument, right? We can always, like I said, in practice, we would often, we would not often practice what we preach, but sometimes, at least we need to preach the right thing, that's the key point. Okay, so let's talk about, these are the various points I'm going to talk about. Now, what you see, this is like a iceberg. And what you see above the iceberg is what is seen to you. What is below the iceberg are more theoretical and more, abstract ideas which I'm going to present towards you. And I hope, the patient ship doesn't hit the iceberg because, that will sink their practice, their ship and my practice, that's the key point. Okay, so let's first talk about guidelines and what do guidelines really say. So the American Diabetes Association says, and I quote, although most patients prefer oral medications to drugs that need to be injected, the eventual need, and the key point being eventual need for greater potency of an injectable medication is common, particularly in people with a long duration of disease, right? This is what ADA guidelines, and this is I quoted verbatim from the ADA 2020 guidelines. So what they're saying is eventually all patients are going to be on insulin, right? Even though we may do all kinds of beta cell preservation, this is the end story which is going to be there. And having said that, adding a fourth drug or a fifth drug or a sixth drug, you're basically just preventing the eventuality, buying some time. I think, even the eventuality, as ADA clearly says, we all know what happens in practice. What about AACE? AACE clearly says, and this is again I quote, patients taking 2 oral antihyperglycemic drugs with HbA1c more than 8 and or on long-standing type 2 diabetes are less likely to reach their target A1C with a third oral antihyperglycemic drug. We are not even talking about fourth, they are talking about third OAD, and they say that patient should be on insulin. Again, if you see their guidelines, this is the 2020 AACE guideline. Clearly, after the third or second oral antidiabetic drug, their preference is to add or intensify insulin as that is their recommendation. But let's not go too far to the American guidelines, right? At the end of the day, we practice in India. So what does the RSSDI and ESI? They gave a combined guidelines which were published in 2020. And, again I quote, they say insulin therapy should be considered in all patients failing to achieve glycemic target on 3 oral antidiabetic drugs. Now, I'm not saying this, right? We have with us, the RSSDI president, and we also had the ESI president, immediate ESI past president today, and the ESI current president, and the ESI future president in this, event. And, all of them, with all due respect to them, I think we should listen to them. They're pretty much senior in this business, and, their recommendations say insulin therapy should be considered in all patients failing to achieve glycemic targets on 3 oral antidiabetic drugs. Again, like I said, I'm not saying this, the guidelines are saying this. What about efficacy, right? Again, I'm not going to show you any data on efficacy. Every single person listening to this talk knows that the most efficacious drug ever for diabetes management is insulin. Again, if you don't believe my word for it, you can check out the ADA guidelines, and in that ADA guidelines, in the table, there is a column for efficacy, and all ADA says about efficacy is that it is the highest, right? It's the highest efficacy amongst all the drugs, right? And why would you not want to use a drug which has the highest efficacy, especially 3 of your less efficacious drug have already failed, right? That's the core question. Now let's talk about what is below the visible, below the below the sea line in the iceberg. Let's look at the pathophysiology. And here I would like to differ a little bit from my friend. They talked about the omnious octet, and fine, I completely agree. There are multiple pathophysiological aspects of diabetes management, but the key pathophysiological aspect is actually insulin deficiency. It was insulin deficiency and it will remain insulin deficiency no matter how many octets and pentates that we add to the pathophysiological list. The key point being that type 2 diabetes is a disease of ultimately insulin deficiency in a background of insulin resistance. Again, don't take my word for it. Read the Harrison's textbook of medicine, right? That is all sometimes something like a Bible for all of us. And again, I'll quote from Harrison's textbook of medicine. Although the primary defect is controversial, most studies support the view that insulin resistance precedes an insulin secretory defect, agreed, but that diabetes develops only when insulin secretion becomes inadequate. This is a line taken verbatim from Harrison's textbook of medicine. Again, like I said, this is like a Bible, Gita, Quran for all of us, and I think, we take their word for it on point. What about the progression of the disease, right? What happens when the disease progresses? And I think Dr. Agrawal also pointed to this, that type 2 diabetes is a disease of progressive beta cell failure. And again, I'd like to quote to a very interesting chart given here. You can see the stages of diabetes and the beta cell dysfunction. Initially, you have insulin, you have the IGT, where the beta cell function is about 75 to 80%. Then you have postprandial hyperglycemia, when the beta cell function is somewhere between 50 to 70%. And then you have type 2 early phase, where you have beta cell function almost 50 to 60%. And as it progresses, as the diabetes goes on to 10 or 14 years, the beta cell function is almost negligible to about 20 to 30%, right? And this is also something which we see in clinical practice, that there is a progressive beta cell failure. And when there is beta cell failure, the patient ultimately would need insulin, as you can also see from this chart here, that insulin is ultimately what is going to work for your patients. So these are all pathophysiological frameworks. Now let me talk to you about a theoretical framework, right? In a theoretical framework, I'll ask you to imagine certain scenarios and try to fit what is the best treatment in such scenarios. But before I go to that, there's another interesting analogy. Since some of you, while they're listening to this, a lot of you would be also interestingly watching, the cricket match which is going on. I'm sorry. They'll be watching the cricket match which is going on. And we know that in a T20 or a one-day match, we always send the best batsman up front, right? I'll come to this point in a few minutes, so keep this thing in mind. Let's talk about some theoretical frameworks. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're working in a situation where you are asked to give only one. All the other drugs have to be probably sent to somewhere else, or they have to be thrown into the water. You have just one option which you want to preserve for treatment of type 2 diabetes. What would be that option? And I'm sure all of you would agree that if you had no other option, if you had no other drug which was invented for diabetes mellitus, the option which you would always have till eternity was insulin, right? And if there is the other drugs, in a lot of cases you might not use metformin, a lot of cases you might not use SGLT2, a lot of cases you will not use DPP4, but insulin can be used in every situation. If you had no other choice, insulin will still remain your choice, right? Let me give you another theoretical framework. And a lot of, Dr. Agrawal's talk was on insulin being an injectable drug. Let me put it theoretically. What if insulin was oral? What if insulin was an oral drug? What if insulin was an oral drug? Would we still be having this debate? Absolutely not. Why? Because if you look at other endocrine disorders, for example, if you take hypothyroidism, that's a defect in T3 and T4, and what do we treat it with? We treat it with Thyronorm or thyroxine, which is basically T4, right? When you talk about primary ovarian insufficiency in women, what do we treat that with? We treat it with estrogen and progesterone. in men with testosterone deficiency, what do we treat it with? We treat it with testosterone, right? So the defect, the primary defect in endocrine disorder is what is treated, and as we saw from what Harrison quoted and what we all know, that type 2 diabetes, the primary defect still being insulin deficiency and insulin secretory defect, and we treat that with insulin. Why don't we go to that far? Our own other side of type 2 diabetes, the type 1 diabetes, where you have absolute insulin deficiency. What is the treatment? Insulin, right? So at the end of the day, if this was oral, just like levothyroxine, which is oral, I don't think we would be having this debate. Perhaps I don't think we would, on the hindsight, not even having this conference, at the end of the day, because a lot of the times, we are our entire framework is dependent on oral anti-diabetic drugs. And again, let me come to the third theoretical frame point. What if the algorithm was completely reversed, right? I want you to think about it, right? Just like I told you, when you are playing a T20 match, you are not, if let's say you are Virat Kohli and you are the captain of the Indian cricket team, would you, when you are chasing a score of 380, 390 against Australia in a one-day match, would you send Jasprit Bumrah first in the batting? Would you send Yuzvendra Chahal as first batsman? Absolutely not. Whom would you send? You would send Mayank Agrawal, excellent batsman. You would send Dhawan, excellent hard-hitting batsman. You will send the best batsman up, right? But what do we do in diabetes? We start with lifestyle measure, which we know in a lot of patients it fails. Then we give metformin, then we give a second drug, then we give a third drug, so on and so forth. Ultimately, we add a basal insulin. This is the conventional treatment. Let me tell you, and of course this is theoretical. Let me ask you to flip the pyramid. And let's start with the most potent therapy first. Let's start with basal insulin or GLP analog as the first treatment. Then, of course, start down titrating and ultimately reach metformin and then lifestyle measure. Think about it. If this was originally what was always taught to us, we would be practicing this way and we would be much successful, because overall, if you see, the average global HbA1c is still 8 or 9, and we are not doing very well as far as treatment of diabetes globally is concerned, and we are still very concerned about it. And what is the benefit of reversing this pyramid? Because early on, the most amount of glucotoxicity is there early on, and if you can break this glucotoxicity by giving insulin, you will actually achieve something which is great. We also know from the UKPDS and the other follow-up studies that early intensive glycemic management or early good glycemic management led to better dividends on a long run. You had less microvascular and macrovascular complications in patients who were intensively treated early on. And what is the most effective therapy? Who is the Virat Kohli? Who is the Shikhar Dhawan? Who is the Mayank Agrawal of diabetes management? Who is the most effective? Which is the most effective agent for diabetes management? The answer is insulin, and I'm sure both Navneet Agrawal and perhaps even Mayank Agrawal would agree that Mayank Agrawal is one of the fantastic batsmen. Okay, so this is theoretical framework, and finally I'll just end by giving some of my own personal beliefs. And like I talked about, early reduction of glucotoxicity, and again, this is there in the RSSDI guidelines for insulin therapy. There are papers from India that patients presenting in an explosive manner in type 2 diabetes, if you give insulin therapy for the first few weeks, you might actually induce a sense of intermittent remission or perhaps even a partial or complete remission in some of these patients. But you also know from UKPDS and other long-term studies that early reduction of glucotoxicity reduces long-term micro as well as macrovascular complications. It creates a good metabolic memory, and ultimately what we are doing now is treating to succeed. We are going over the top of the disease, right? Take any disease, take any other branch of medicine, right? If the patient has, let's say, breast cancer, right? What are you going to do in a patient having breast cancer? You are going to give the most effective treatment first, that is surgery. You are not going to first give the patient tamoxifen, then you are going to give the patient letrozole, then if it even fails, then you will consider giving radiotherapy, then it fails, you go on to do a surgery. No, what do? You give the most effective treatment first. What do you do when a patient comes to you in emergency with a head injury, right? You will call the neurosurgeon. If the patient has bleed, you will call the neurosurgeon first. You will give the most effective treatment first, not the least effective treatment first, right? So the point here, I'll just end here. My point here is that you treat to succeed and not treat to fail, right? So that's the key point here, right? I hope this reverberates in your mind. I think at the end of the day, when you want to win against type 2 diabetes, you need to have Mayank Agrawal and Dr. Navneet Agrawal here really fighting this battle. Not Jasprit Bumrah batting, like he's from Ahmedabad. So I think that's the correlation here. Thank you so much.